All right, let's get started. All right, manuscript preparation. So we'll dive into this manuscript preparation and submission today instead of talking about other stuff. So as you can see, there are every journal receives thousands of submissions, right? Even we, submit on a weekly basis, if not on a daily basis, right? So there are a lot of journals to pick from. So the big thing is how to format for it, how to, pick the journal and whatnot. So the first thing that the editors do is they quickly screen manuscript for compliance. And even before it gets to the editor's desk, there are technical editors who look for the formatting, if all the information that each journal is requiring is there or not. Okay. So poor formatting may lead to immediate rejections. There are some journals who will tell you, hey, fix this and then resubmit, so they'll get it back to you and you have certain days to fix it and resubmit. Other journals will automatically, reject your manuscript if it's not formatted per the manuscript. You may have a perfect format, but it may not fit the requirements of that particular journal. So always make sure that you follow the instruction for others. In some journals, it's also called author's guide. So you always have to look at it and make sure that you follow what the journal is requiring. So in terms of formatting, these are the basic ones. And then, of course, there are some journals who will require additional or they will condense it. For instance, title. There's the abstract. There's a structured and unstructured. The difference between structured and unstructured is the structure will separate it into objective, methods, results, discussion, conclusion, whereas the unstructured will be a specific paragraph. The introduction, some call it background, right? And the methods, be careful because sometimes it will be in this series, whereas there are some journals where they want the methods at the back. There are even some journals who will want the methods as supplementary material there. Then comes the results, which is one of the most important part of the manuscript, and discussion. For me personally, discussion is the most difficult, as you probably are facing while you are writing it, and also the most interesting because you should be able to interpret what your results are saying per the question, per the hypothesis that you have. And then, of course, the conclusion. Now, be careful about references too. So I'm sure all of you have used one of the citation softwares, either the EndNote, Zotero, Mendeley, and there are other softwares out there which makes your life easy. So as we were discussing, word limit. So it depends on what type of article you are presenting, what type of journal. There are word limits for the article. There are word limits for the abstract. Some go with typically it's 250 words to 350 words for abstract. Again, like I said earlier, there's the structured and unstructured. Even with the article, make sure you count the word limits because uh, the technical editors can send it back to you if you cross the word limit sometimes. And these days, AI will count the words for you, and then it may say, okay, you need to cut, certain words or something like that. Okay. Also, keep in mind about the number of figures and tables that each journal will allow. So you need to look at the author's guide, because there are some who are very strict, others may not. One key thing is be creative in terms of if you think that there are two tables, is there a way to combine those two tables? In terms of figure one trick that I sometimes use is instead of saying figure one, figure two, I'll call it figure 1A, figure 1B. So it counts as one figure. Okay, so there are creative. Now that doesn't mean that go A to Z and put like 26 different figures as figure one, but there are, if it is related, then you can do that. Okay, there are some journals who will specifically say, hey, you only are allowed 30 references. If you have that, here again the trick is use meta-analysis or systemic review papers, so that covers a broad range of what you are trying to say. Okay, and there are other sections that is required, in terms of the formatting. Also, pay attention to the table formatting, okay, including footnotes. Sometimes they also are very specific in terms of what symbols you can use on the footnote. Some will go with numerical numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. Others might go with A, B, C, D. Others might use symbol like cross sign or a plus sign or dollar sign and whatnot. Okay. There are some journals who will allow you to insert tables and images in between the manuscript. But more than often, you put the tables at the end of the manuscript, and then you also have to use the figures as images as a separate document. So in that term, they also may require specific resolution of the images. So be very mindful of that. That's why you have to follow the instructions. Some will ask for like a JPEG, some will ask for TIFF. It all depends. But the key is it has to be high resolution image. Okay. So I will quickly go through authorship before I hand it over to Dr. Arsana. So, the big elephant in the room when you are writing a manuscript is who should be a co author, who should be acknowledged, and who should not be neither. Okay. So, fellows, just speak out if you think what they should be. So, here are some examples that we put together. A graduate student who helped you with literature search and graphs, do you think that particular graduate student should be a co-author, should just be acknowledged in the paper, or you don't need to do anything? Any thoughts?
Maybe acknowledge.
Okay. Others?
I think it depends upon the level of involvement, like literatures, like how much they are involved, like little to intense, like how is their involvement. So, according to which, if their involvement is like, so we are talking about a literature source. So, beginning बाटै हुन्छ भने चाहिँ we need to incorporate as the co-author. Otherwise, we can acknowledge them.
Yeah. So if you are the first author or the last author, you have a say, in terms of how much did this person contribute. And the contribution has to be intellectual contribution, right? And sometimes you can just say, I paid the student and they just did what I asked them to do. So you have to gauge, was that an intellectual contribution of that person, or was that just like an administrative work that this particular student did? Okay. So it can go either as a co-author or acknowledge, but since it was contributing to the manuscript, yes, you need to at least acknowledge, that particular student. Okay. The second one is, I'm sure everybody knows that, Miss Maya, who owns a tea shop and provides you free tea every time you go to the shop and to write a paper. Yeah, she was great. She was very nice and all that, but that doesn't mean that she should be acknowledged nor be a co-author. Okay. Your administrative assistant who copy edited your manuscript. There is, no, intellectual contribution for this particular manuscript, so neither. Study participants. What do you think of the study participants? Any thoughts?
You should acknowledge them.
Okay. Yes, they should be
Yeah.
acknowledged. You need to be thankful because without them, your study is not possible. You don't need to name everybody, but at least have a statement saying, thanking the participants. Okay. Of course, E, I think I'm sure everybody knows that. F, you discussed your data with the research staff and she told you which analysis to use. In this case, I would say neither. Okay, it's not a quote. It's something that you had a conversation in passing, and anybody can tell you which analysis to do and all that. So just because now, if they went and did the analysis, and present the results and discussed with you, that's a different thing. Okay. But if they just say, hey, maybe you should use this analysis or read a paper or send you a paper, then that doesn't. The other thing that we often feel pressured is also G, your department head. Just because they give you some funding, just because they give you the predicted time, doesn't mean that they are co-authors, or they should be acknowledged. Sometimes you might be pressured, but you need to have a candid conversation with the senior author of the paper. Because just because somebody is the dean or the department head or administrative head doesn't mean that they should be part of the manuscript. Remember, there should be a intellectual contribution in that paper. Okay, a statistician in your research group, that you meet, let's say on a daily basis, that you hire, but you pay from another grant. Technically they should not be in that paper, because unless you think that they contributed, they did the analysis for you during their leisure time, because remember, this person is paid by another project, so you cannot borrow somebody in your project, because it was paid by another project. Okay. um, and so forth. The one And then of course there's that publicly available data set, right? There are repositories. Some of you might be doing secondary data analysis, but if you do secondary data analysis, it depends on what the repository is saying, what the people who share the data is saying. So you may have to acknowledge where you got the data from, and also maybe there's an accession number, maybe there's a data number, so you have to provide that, and most of the journals will require that. Nowadays, you will also see that some of the journals will ask you, did you use AI? And ChatGPT is the. Now, sometimes you may do some editing using ChatGPT, which is fine. But if you ask ChatGPT to write the paper, there is a basic, a very fundamental issue with that. And perhaps I would even be strong enough to say that if you are asking ChatGPT to write your manuscripts, maybe academia is not for you. Okay. All right. Archana, do you want to comment on this one, the international standards of authorship?
Sure. So I think Sarita has already explained with a detailed example, but this is like just a general guideline about like who should share the authorship in a manuscript. So when you think about whether or not you would offer a authorship to anybody in your manuscript, that person, like you think about it, like think about whether or not that person qualifies, and think about these four criteria. So substantial contribution to study design, data collection or data analysis, contribution, either contributing to drafting or revising the manuscript, approval for final version, and agreement to be accountable for this work. So all of these four criteria has to be met. So for example, even though Sadipta and I are facilitating you, like connecting you with your mentors and all, and you have been working on your own project, so do you think we should be co-authors on your paper? What do you think?
I think no. No.
What if we ask, Amrita, I did so much for you, you have to make me your co-author on your paper?
Yeah, but I need to like convince you depending on those four criteria.
Yeah, so think about those criteria. And in Nepal, I know a lot of time we just try to. It's very common for senior people to. It's actually more common than we think it is. The senior people to be in the manuscript, even if they have not even like read it even once. Yeah. So, Sadip, can we go to next slide? Yeah, so who should be acknowledged? So you can acknowledge important contributions. So, for example, you could acknowledge like us on your manuscript. Like I'm not trying to say acknowledge us, but these are the criteria. So your research assistants, your data collectors, your field supervisors, your administrative staff, funding agencies, technical advisors, like even if you have consulted like one or twice about specific issues, about scientific issues in your manuscript, but if they don't meet the four criteria that I just discussed, we just discussed, then you can still acknowledge them in your paper. And
Okay, so I
next.
would I would even be bold to say, so Amrita, you hesitated a little bit. You should say absolutely no. You cannot be co-author in my paper. You should be bold enough to say that. I would even go further and say, yeah, individually we should not even be acknowledged. The program should be acknowledged, but not. So this is a culture that we need to start, developing.
Okay, next. So who should be neither author nor be acknowledged? So too minor for authorship or acknowledged, like routine administrative support, general supervision without intellectual input, providing equipment or funding only, and just casual discussions or advice, like just very, very casual discussion or advice. Then you could don't even acknowledge, or like authorship is far away. Okay, so common authorship problems are gift authorships, adding someone who did not contribute. So I say absolutely no to that. So I think, as Sadip said, be bold and say absolutely no. Ghost authorships is sometimes people who have made substantial contributions are left out, and I think that's also not correct. So look at it very carefully, like who has had a very, very substantial contribution in your paper. And honorary authorship, like senior leaders without real involvement. This is Sadipta is very, very common in Nepal. You're just trying to, I don't know if it is pleasing, I don't know if it is the culture, I don't know if it is expected, or what is it, but like honorary authorship is also very common, but these are not political like, sorry, publication ethics, like they violate the publication ethics.
So in many ways, your department head, your dean, the vice chancellor should not be part of your, co-authors list.
Yeah, so another important thing is authorship order. So the first author is the primary contributor or manuscript writer. So the first author is the one who actually writes the manuscript, at least take the leadership in writing the manuscript and writes majority of it, I would say. And then middle authors, depending on contribution to study design, analysis, or writing. And usually, like you could you could rank other co-authors based on their contribution, like higher contributing co-authors can come first, and then so on. And the last author is the senior investigator or supervising researcher in your team. And then corresponding author is the author who will correspond with the journal, but also if readers have questions, they will contact them. And most of the time in Nepal, what I have seen in Nepal is first author is corresponding author, but sometimes last authors can also be corresponding authors when papers are published out of like a bigger projects or like a larger study. If small papers come out, last are also corresponding authors. But Sadip, like, can you add like what have you been practicing?
So one of the things that I usually do with corresponding author is you have to be, just because you are the last author doesn't mean that you are the corresponding author. Sometimes the second last author can be corresponding author or the first author. But my thinking is, if that particular person is gonna continue with that research, I think it makes sense to be a corresponding author, because if a student comes and just writes a paper and then moves on and does something else, and then remember, this is going to be out for public, and somebody wants to know more about your data, somebody wants to know more about or follow up or borrow your data. And that is why they are, requiring corresponding author, because technically we think that, oh, this is the person who's going to be contacting the journal, but it's beyond that. So you may need to start thinking about that. So whenever it's my student, I always say, is this something that you want to do for your future? Is this something that you're going to pursue? And if they say yes, absolutely, I make them first corresponding author, because it's there to build their career. But if not, then either I or somebody who's working in the field, I make them the corresponding author. Sometimes you can also make co-corresponding author. So maybe the first author can be, and then another person can be, although journals usually only like one, but you can put two of them. The other thing is also, with first author, sometimes there are co-first authors, so you can put, because if two people, two authors contributed equally, so the key word is contributed equally, then you can put a little asterisk and say, say both of them contributed equally, and then make both of them first author or corresponding author.
Yeah, so what I have been doing is when my students publish their master's thesis and they are the first author, but when the students work on my larger project, which like it's like multi-year project, then I usually become the um, corresponding author. But even in the larger projects, there are different expertise. Like, for example, in my own research, like we have epidemiological implementation research, then the socio-economic analysis portion of it, and then like each co-investigator could also be the last author depending on their expertise. And that's like what Sadip Dai said, like who is going to respond to the questions in the future and who is going to be in that working in that area for a long time makes more sense. Okay, now let's move to general journal selection. So I use this analogy for everyone for the journal select, like you selecting the journal and journal selecting you. So there are two things. One is that you would be the one first making the move. So there is this. It's like a dating app. Sorry that I always use that analogy. Are you swipe? So you have to swipe right, and the journal will also have to swipe right, and without that, the match will not be made. Um, so match always whenever you are thinking about submitting to the journal. The very important thing is choose the right journal for your article. Don't just follow the impact factor. Oh, I want to publish in Lancet. Oh, I want to publish in like I don't know, like they like big JAMA or something, like big journals. Like don't go to that. Like look at the journal, look at its scope, look at what kind of papers has it been publishing, review its aims and scope, check the recent articles in the journal, see if it has an open access options, what is the fee, and then also you can consider impact metrics. So what I do is I list all of the journals that is suitable for my papers, and then I try to rank them based on the impact factors, and then I'll try go with the highest impact factor first, but not randomly. Yeah, yeah. Sadip, that you can
All right.
like
So one of the things is you use the matrix. Everybody's probably heard of this impact factor. It is something that we look for, but at the same time, I would also caution that be a little bit mindful, because if your discipline is very specific, some of the journals will not have a high impact factor. Okay. So for instance, if you are in the HIV/AIDS field, AIDS is the prestigious journal, but I don't think the impact factor is above 5 right now, because everybody wants to publish it, but then it's not a broad, thing. Most of the high impact factor journals are review journals, because everybody wants to cite those review articles, right? So just to give you a flavor of what impact factor means. So let's say the 2026 impact factor won't be released until 2027. Here's why. What it does is it looks at the articles. So for that particular journal, it will look for, okay, what were the articles, how many articles were published in 2025 and 2024, and how many of those articles were cited in 2026. So it's basically citations in year 2026 to items published in years 2025 and 2024, divided by the number of citable items. That means the number of published articles in the years 2024 and 2025 for that particular journal. That's how the impact factor is calculated. But if you go for 5 years, sometimes you will see 5-year impact factor. and it is not just for 2 years, but the 5 years, the past 5 years, how many of those articles were cited this particular year. Okay, so that's how you calculate that. That's what impact factor means. Impact means, if somebody cites your paper, that means it has been impactful, right? Somebody found it very, useful. But again, keep in mind, review articles will always have, those journals with a lot of review articles will have, because earlier we said some of the journals will say you are only allowed to have 30, references. So instead of, referencing all those articles that you read, you're gonna, cite a reference, article or meta-analysis article or something like that. And there are other ways to do it too. Some of them have different weighing, and then they calculate the prestige. Prestige again is a relative thing. Just because you are cited a lot of time doesn't necessarily mean that it is the earth-shaking, Nobel Prize winning, research that you did. It's just that at the time, at the moment, it was important. So again, if it's very specific to the field, it is unlikely that many people will cite your paper. But if it's a general, like a methods paper, if a lot of people are using logistic regression paper, the first logistic regression paper will be cited over and over because everybody has to use that kind of model there. Okay, and here are some other matrices that they use, but you can read that. And also, there are, like Archana was saying earlier, there are ways to say, okay, is this a good fit? Is this journal a good fit, for your thing? So we've listed some of these where you can just go and put your abstract or your title, and then it will try to see which journal matches the best. That doesn't necessarily mean that this is the journal that's going to accept your paper. It basically means that, based on the keywords that you use, the title that you used or the abstract that you used, these might match. So it's like a, matchmaking thing, like, Arjuna was saying earlier. And you can try some of those. All right, Archana, you wanna?
Okay, so now writing the paper, like just think about like all of these things. So you would need for sure abstract, introduction, methods, result, discussion, and conclusion. Of course, we'll not go detail into that, but what I strongly suggest is use the reporting guidelines. So if it is the RCT, like use a consort guideline for observational study, strobe for the reviews, Prisma, and go line by line and see whether all of the things that these guidelines have indicated is included in your paper, and that will make your paper much more stronger. And then you will have to submit your supplementary materials. Nowadays, I've been experiencing like a journal is asking for the questionnaires. In the qualitative research, in my past, I think at least 3 qualitative papers that I've just published, they have asked for both uncoded and coded transcripts. So be ready to have all of those very clean in a clean format, de-identify all of them before you submit to anyone. So be very careful, but even before you analyze, de-identify all of your data because you will have to share at some point with the journals. And as Sadip Jai said, we have to be very strategic about making our tables. And then you can look at journals guidelines. Sometimes the journal restrict number of tables. In that case, you can submit the additional table. You think it is very interesting and maybe like interesting to other readers or audiences, but it's not fitting in your paper. Then you can like, or is a bulky data, then you can submit it as an additional tables, and journal publish those as well in addition to your paper. If you want to publish the statistical codes, that would be also possible.
Yeah, most of the journals are asking for this because of transparency and then to also reduce fabrication. Because the whole point is, if you wrote a paper and then you give me that data set, and if I am I able to replicate? Because based on what you said in the methods, if I follow those, I should be able to, get the same results as you. So, our results, our analysis has to be authenticated. And so for that, some of these journals will specifically ask for some of these material. Like we said earlier, the trick is also, if you have a lot of tables or something, you may want to decide, okay, are these some of these going to be in supplementary material? The thing is, what's the difference? Well, most of the supplementary materials will be um, only online. So if you have a paper, journal, your article will be published there, but all the supplementary material will be placed online with a link there. So
Yeah.
other components of the manuscript needed will be ethics statement. You have to make an ethical, what you did. So this is where the ERB and IRB comes in too. So you have to say that the ERB, IRB was approved by, your institute or NHRC or foreign, institute or whatever. You need to state that, and then maybe even write the number. And some will go above and beyond and will ask, what were some of the considerations for the ethics for your study. The conflict of interest, you have to, mention that if you were using some assets and you have a stock on that company, you have to, even if you had nothing to do with it, you have to disclose that. If you were given some funds by somebody, you have to disclose that. Not just that the grant fund, but if you were asked to give an honorary talk on this topic by, some institute or company or pharma, then you have to mention that, just to be transparent with that. Again, funding statement, you have to state which funding agency, funded this. Uh,
Yeah, and at least one journal has asked me for the ethical approval letter as well. And we submitted and we rejected it. And the journal rejected, saying that it's not ethical. And then we realized that we only submitted the first ethical approval and we did not submit the amendment letter. And in the amendment letter, we had extension for the data collection. So that happened to us. So when they ask, like, make sure that you submit all of your extended amendments as well.
and then just read the author's guide, because they will specifically say these are required. Now, this doesn't apply to every journal. So this is why it is very journal specific sometimes.
Mm.
And you have to mention, if you are using secondary data analysis, you have to say where you got it from and what the accession number is, because every data, if it is uploaded in a repository, will have an accession number. So it will make it easier for whoever reading it there. Now, if it is funded through some funders, funders will also make you make data available publicly. Specifically, NIH here at US, National Institute of Health, will say if you collected data, you have to make the data available publicly after so many years. Now, there is a catch there, because you can upload the data and say this is the accession number, but when you upload it, you can also say make this publicly available after 2 years, because my project, my grant is still running. I'm still doing conducting the study. I'm still writing the manuscript. So don't make this data available publicly until 2 years or 3 years. So you can still do that, but you have to at least say, hey, data has been uploaded there. The other thing, going back to what we said about authors, you know, almost all journals now require this author contribution. What exactly did this author do? Don't say that this person is the vice chancellor of my university. That doesn't justify author contribution there. So you have to, again, intellectual contribution. How did they, you know, and then some will even ask uh, an authorization from each of the co-authors, saying that they actually saw and approved the content of the study. Okay, there are a lot of journals where each author has to sign that, and in other journals is the corresponding author who will have to sign that on behalf of the co-authors. Okay, so it all depends on the journal. Archana?
Okay, so writing the cover letter, or don't try to put in everything of your manuscript in the cover letter. What they are trying to see is to screen your paper, whether or not it fits into the journal. So give the title of the manuscript, what type of article it is, whether it's original article, report, or short communication, perspective, etc. The importance of the study, give them like a very brief rationale of your study, and then mm, don't like leave this out, like you have to write why the manuscript fits the journal. The statement that the work is not under review elsewhere, we were not allowed to submit the same manuscript in two different journals at the same time. You'll do it one by one. So once you submit the paper, if the paper is rejected, or you can withdraw it yourself, and in that case you can submit it to another journal. So be very specific that this is the only journal where you are submitting. If there is any conflict of interest, state that, and make sure that you got the editor's name correct. Sometimes we are recycling our cover letter from one after another journal and we miss that part. So especially when you get rejected in one journal and trying to recycle it, make sure your editor's name is correct. And then if you are submitting in response to a special call for papers, you can mention that, but keep it brief.
And
Yeah.
then, there are now journals even asking you if this was submitted elsewhere and then the reason why they were rejected. They
Mhm.
even have started asking that. And then most of the time you are in good shape if the journal says, oh, this is beyond the scope of the journal. Then that's fine because maybe you submitted to the wrong journal. And so that is why it's very important to go and read the objective, the vision of the journal, the purpose of the journal, and then make sure that your article fits not just the topic, but what you are trying to do in the study fits, and then you can make that argument in the cover letter. And like what Arjuna said, a mistake. A lot of few of my students have made this mistake because when we get rejected in one journal and we submit to the other one, I usually say, hey, use the same cover letter. That doesn't mean use the same cover letter. Go and change the name of the journal, name of the editor, and so forth. Okay, so the format might be the same, but not exactly the same.
Yeah, for submission process, create an account in the submission portal of that journal, and then you upload the manuscript. It depends on you read the instruction carefully. Whether like sometimes they ask you to upload the manuscript with tables and figures in the manuscript. Sometimes they want you to submit it separately. Sometimes tables are included, but then they want separate files for figures. So read that carefully and just follow the instruction. Upload supplementary files. This will be mostly available in the journal website, but will not be in the journal paper, like a paper journal. Upload the cover letter, and suggest reviewers. Very important. If the journal is asking you to suggest a reviewer, just do that. Don't skip it. Sometimes it is optional. Even when it is optional, just put in the review. It will make your like the journals editor's life so much easier and your life so much easier, because now it's so hard to find reviewers. And when you suggest your reviewers, don't suggest anybody very very close to you. Think about the subject expertise, but you should not have had to get publication together. I would say even like last 5 years. I don't know, Sadip, that what criteria you are using. I use like in the last 5 years, we haven't submitted any paper together. Is not from my same department, is not from my same university, but is expert in that subject area.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, 5 years. And then the other thing is if you go to conferences and you meet people and you had a good conversation with somebody, and you are not working with them, but, you think that they are experts, suggest them. When you suggest reviewers, there are two types. One is the reviewers that you want, and then there are some journals that who are the reviewers that you want to exclude, because you may have, intellectual or academic enemies, quote unquote, or you have two groups competing. You don't want the other group to be reviewing your paper and sit on it and then, take your ideas or just kill it to find, something that is unnecessarily relevant.
Yeah, even make I would say like right around nowadays we are also making a list of potential reviewers for our papers. So like if I am a professor, like I would not list my students or I would not list my anybody from my department or so forth. But be very this is a very good opportunity. I would like take it as an opportunity, but try to avoid conflict of interest. So what happens after submission? The editors evaluate whether it is relevant to the journal, what is the scientific quality, ethical compliance, formatting. A lot of time you will get back to fix the formatting, but sometimes you just get rejected because of the formatting. So be careful about that. Yeah, the possible outcome is desk rejection without even peer review, and it will happen I think within a week. A lot of journals just reject it within a week when you submit it if it does not meet their journal relevance or formatting. If it passes through the editorial screening, then editors send it to reviewers, and reviewers have to accept to review your journal, and then they would evaluate the study quality, and they submit comments and recommendations. And the typical reviewer decision is either they accept it or they call you for minor revision, major revision, or just reject it. Nowadays I'm seeing like reviewers recommending, oh, cite these papers, and they are listing their own papers. I don't know if you are but that I don't think that's a good practice though. Sometimes they do it, and when you respond to reviewers comment, be very positive about it, even if you don't agree with their uh, comment or whatever they are trying making you to change. You don't have to change everything that they are suggesting, but you can argue based on the scientific reasoning very politely as well. I think
Yeah,
we have yeah.
talking about that, what Archana mentioned, there was one time when I was the associate editor handling a manuscript, and then well, so we had three reviewers. Two of them, said minor revision, blah blah blah. The third, kind of killed the manuscript, and then said they are not citing relevant papers, blah blah blah. Here are 10 relevant papers that they missed. And I carefully looked at it, and 9 out of 10 had that person as a co-author in that paper. And so I
Yeah.
was like, I told the editor, I said, okay, we should exclude this, person's review because this is very biased, kind of. The other thing that you will also see is remember that impact factor curve. Sometimes, these, predator journals, which probably Archana will mention in a little bit, some of these editors will say, hey, cite this paper, and then all of them are coming from their own journal, because that is going to boost their impact factor. Remember that.
Hmm. So those are biased. Like if somebody is asking you to cite, sometimes it happens like you are citing old data and they want you to cite a new data, new papers, which is fine, but I'm seeing that a lot nowadays. Mm. Okay, when you respond to reviewers, address each reviewer's comment carefully. So you don't miss any comment. Provide point by point response, make corresponding change in the manuscript. So it's not enough that you would say, hey, I did this because I had limited resources. The only responding to the reviewer's comment is not enough. Then you have to also say what you did about it in your manuscript, because think it from the perspective of readers. If the reviewer is making that comment, but then that will be confusing for your audience later on as well. So other people will also think about it. So it's not about satisfying reviewers query, it is about making your paper more clear and more reachable to wider audience. So whenever somebody is making comment, you respond to that response, but at the same time you also address it in your manuscript. So for example, you are somebody somebody made a comment like, why did you not like include so and so location, like why didn't you do urban and rural? Then you can say, okay, I had a limited time or limited resources, and then you can also like add on in your limitation section that this is only this study was conducted only in the rural, so the data will be general, like the result will be generalizable in this so and so population. So make sure that you responded to the both the to the rest letter, in the letter as well as in your manuscript, and highlight the changes made in the manuscript. Most of the journals will require you to submit two versions, both the changed version, track changed version, and the final clean version. So highlight the changes made in the manuscript, and then some will require both documents. I think most of journal is nowadays requiring, and remain very respectful and professional. So even if you don't agree, if people are sometimes they make a very they miss the point in your paper. Sometimes they make a silly comment, and then don't say you this is comment is silly. You would say okay, be very respectful about that. So in one occasion, and there is a very funny story. In one occasion, I met with this faculty member in our university, and she's like, I have made like changes 5 times, but the journal is still asking me to make changes and submit, and then I really want you to look at my paper. And then I went back and then I read it, and the journal's comment was, they don't see the changes in her manuscript. What she is doing is she is just submitting the clean version by changing it, but the journal is like keep asking to change. So there was this big misunderstanding, and then I told her like submit both, like like a track change version and the clean version. She submitted that, and in a week her paper was accepted. So sometimes that happened. It was just clear miscommunication. So yeah,
And that
anyway.
thing is very important to be respectful and professional. When we get our reviews back, the first thing that we want to do is scream and tell, that the reviewer is an idiot and didn't understand what you. Well, that's all true and great. Go vent, take a break, 3 days, and then go back and then reread it. And then, even if you disagree, just try to make some changes based on the suggestion by the reviewers. Remember, these reviews, the changes that you made, well, sometimes the editor will look at it and then will say, okay, this is good enough, or some. But most of the time, they will send it back to the reviewers. So
Yeah.
the reviewers will look at it and say, look, I asked you to do this and you're not changing this. Don't come and argue with me. Even if you disagree, respectfully disagree. That doesn't mean that everything they asked you have to change, but then justify what you changed
Yeah.
or why
One
you.
time a reviewer asked me to change the study design, and that doesn't make any sense. My study is done, the data is collected, like, and then I had to write to editor separately, like this is something that's not doable. Well, okay, that person is asking me to do a stronger, like a stronger version of methods, but this is what we could do with the resources and the time we had at that time. So you could make that argument as well.
And sometimes, like Archana was saying, you don't, you also, there is a way, there's a section in most journals where there is a confidential response that you can make to the editor. So something like a study design that you were saying, hey, look, they're asking me to redo this, whole thing, but the study is already conducted and this is what we are doing. And I've already said there is some limitation in the discussion. So you can make that argument with the editor, and then most of the time the editors will consider that.
Mhm. Yeah, so after acceptance, manuscript enters into production stage and authors review the proofs. Usually they give you very short time to review the proofs, like 24 hours to 48 hours. The first thing I always check is spelling and affiliation of all authors, and that's the place that would most likely go wrong. And then, so try to be very quick. And then something that I also practice is I ask someone else also to review, like other co-authors. So I would send it to other co-authors to review as well, and those who have time they can review. And then the final corrections are made, and article is published. Most of the times, right nowadays, it gets published online. So once it is published, then you cannot make any changes.
So if you see any article with those two words, corrigendum and erratum, Criticism is where the author said, "Oh, there is an error," and then they ask the editor, and then they have to publish a notice. The other one is erratum, where the publisher, themselves made some errors, kind of thing. And then there are others where, very rare, but it is there out there where they have to retract the published article.
Yeah, maybe sorry that we have to be a little bit faster now. We have only 6 minutes left. So, okay, article rejection. Just like I was saying, like dating app, the article will reject, the journal will reject you. It will definitely happen to you in your life. There is no immunity to that. So don't be very emotional about it. It's a very normal part of academic publishing. Don't sulk, just move on. So it is, even highly cited papers were rejected initially, and then reviewers feedback can improve, and then when they sometimes the reviewers provide the comment before they reject it, then you can work on that if you want it. But persistence is the key. So one journal rejects it, just move on to the next journal. Get rejected, move on to the next journal. It's just, and then I mean, I would not even be very, like, don't be very emotionally attached to your paper as well when you submit it. It will be rejected at some point. So what you do after your rejection, don't be reactive. Write to the editor, take a break, read the editor and reviewer's comment carefully, revise the manuscript based on their feedback if appropriate. If not, then just leave it out, and then select another appropriate journal and resubmit. Right now, like, my resubmission cycle is I resubmit in within 2 days if my paper gets rejected. So I do it very fast. I don't like hold on to it. Okay, so very important thing is APC, article processing charges. It's very typically it's required for a lot of open access publishing houses. It can range between $1,000 to $12,000, which is हाम्रो त जिन्दगीभरको कमाइ पनि हुनसक्छ. So it's a big challenges to LMIC, but there is an option for asking the waiver. A lot of journals, I think I have a list in the next slide which journals will offer, which, like, how publishing house offers waivers. But there is a trick. Most journal will require all of the co-authors. Most journal will require first author for sure, B2B LMIC. A lot of journal also require all of the authors to be on the in LMIC. So if you are planning to publish a paper with high income country authors, discuss this beforehand, what to do with APC. They might have some kind of institutional agreement with these journals, and in that case they can get a waiver but please discuss this before you submit it, because you think that, okay, the journal will waive the APC, but then they look at high income, like somebody from the Hopkins is on the author's list, and they will deny it. So be upfront about it. So the request is generally made during the submission process. Confirm LMIC eligibility. Journal will have the eligibility criteria, confirm that. Provide institutional affiliation details. Sometimes journals also ask from letter from our HOD that this project is not funded, and at least if it was funded, then there is no publication fee, there is no funding for the publication. So sometimes they ask for that. So check for mixed authors. There might be different rules. Sometimes, like, they get some percent waiver, and then authors from high income country pay their part, and LMIC one gets rejected. I have had those papers as well. Yeah, and then very, very be cautious about predatory journals. They promise you a lot of things, but then they don't go into real peer review. There may be fake editorial boards, and then mostly, like, if they are saying that, oh, we will publish in 1 month or so, if they are asking for money to get it published, then, like, be very careful about it. I published one paper on a predatory journal. I paid $200. It was published and it was there for 3 months, and after that I didn't see that paper again. So it's gone. That was I didn't know about it. It was very early on in my career. I was very happy that my paper got accepted, and then I've tried to find it later. but there was no sign of that journal. Okay, so do you want to like continue? Yeah, post
Yeah,
public.
so quickly, I'm sure all of you have, used this database, PubMed. There is the European version of PubMed as well. Should have put that link there. And then, of course, Google Scholar. One of the good things about Google Scholar is like you can say which all articles cited your paper too. So you can go and look at that. The other thing is that I think all of you should at least make an account with ResearchGate. It is a great way of social networking. There will be, you can go and request articles. You can expand your collaboration, or people might just ask you for your publication as well if they cannot get it for free. The other one is ORCID ID, so it is a digital identifier. So each individual will have an identifier that is specific for you, and then you can track all your articles and whatnot. This might be very important because some of you will be writing what, let's say, an NIH grant or something. In the bio sketch, that you have to make, you have to include your ORCID ID as well. These are all free. And then the third one is academia. So these are some of the publication networking places where you can put your article up, and then people will look at your article and then try to contact you, or you can also expand your collaboration based on the thing. The other one that you will see more than often these days is the preprint databases. We included two of them here. You can read the pros and cons of putting it in these preprints. One of the things that these preprints will have is these are not peer reviewed yet. So when you submit to a journal, some of them will also ask you, do you want to put it in a preprint? That means basically as it is, as you submit it, it will be there in the database. But it will also track as you get rejected. It will also say, okay, you got rejected from this place, you got rejected from this thing, and finally you were accepted at this thing. After it is the manuscript is finally accepted, then it will link back to the original article. Each of these preprints will be assigned a DOI, which is the digital object identifier. So in online, people will be able to see your article even if it's not officially accepted as a peer reviewed article in a journal. Prasanna, you wanna?
Yeah, so we don't have much time, but don't do plagiarism. Use the plagiarism detection tool. You cannot use others' ideas, text, or data without proper citation. Even after paraphrasing, you have to cite. Duplicate publication is also like just changing a little bit of it, changing a title and publishing into journals is. I'm also finding it common in Nepal, but it's not ethical to do that. If you have any conflict of interest, just declare it, and then report all of the ethical approval and consenting process and consent forms as well, and data transparency like data sharing and supplementary materials um,
So
is that will be like ethical.
So plagiarism is a no, 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 and I don't know how many no's you can use, but it's not acceptable in academia, including I mentioned earlier a little bit about artificial intelligence. So even if it's your own paper, you have to cite it.
Mhm. Yeah, this is the last slide. So start early. Use managers because you will run into referencing issues later on. So from very early on, use referencing managers. Maintain clear communication with co-authors. I would suggest at least give them 2 weeks time to review, and then be persistent through rejection. It's part of the academic life. Yeah, I think this is the last one, Sadipta.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we
Any-
went 3 minutes over time. So perhaps we can have an unofficial meeting later on to discuss if any of you have any questions specific to the topic today. Keep in mind that we've asked all of you to see if you can come up with a draft of your manuscript, talk to your mentors by May, I think, and then possibly in June we will have a presentation of all of you. Did I miss anything, Arjuna?
No, I think we're good. Any questions or comments? Okay.
All right. Thank you all. I know we went fast, but hopefully we have this recorded, so that will be available. And then we can also provide the slides to all the fellows.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay.